Welcome, everybody, to the March 9th regular council meeting. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order, and I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The council, do I hear adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Been moving second. All those in favor? Oh, Tom, you wanted to change something quickly?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, am I on here? Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. It's hard up here. Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and move where are we? Item number 9, final confirmation up to immediately after adoption of the agenda. Correct, Mr. Mayor?
That is correct.
Okay.
Before the proclamations.
Before the proclamations.
Real quick, Corey, can you check on Steve? I'd have to make sure that ready. Thank you. Okay, with that, with the change on the agenda, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, passes unanimously. At this time, I've asked a couple, our deputy mayor to read a proclamation, being that he is probably more familiar and had been friends with Carolyn for more than we all have. So I would like you to read the proclamation on Carolyn Armanini.
It'd be my honor, Mr. Mayor. Whereas Carolyn Armanini was elected to the City Council of Lake Forest Park in November 1993 and served 3 terms ending in December 2005. And whereas Carolyn Armanini had a long-term involvement with the issues affecting our city from serving as a member and chair of the Environmental Quality Commission and as a council member. And whereas Carolyn Armanini provided leadership as a council member during a period of change for the city of Lake Forest Park, which brought about the successful completion of notable projects, including the Public Works Facility, Lyon Creek Waterfront Preserve, Grace Cole Memorial Nature Park, Sphinx Animal Acres Park, and City Hall. And whereas Carolyn Armanini served the citizens of Lake Forest Park by her membership on the King County Solid Waste Advisory Committee and the Metropolitan Solid Waste Management Advisory Committee. And whereas Carolyn Armanini also served 19 years as a North Shore Fire Commissioner from 1995 to 2018. And whereas Carolyn Armanini provided the citizens of Lake Forest Park with many years of service to the community. And whereas the passing of Carolyn Armanini, a great community leader, has caused a deep void of sadness amongst those who knew her. Now, therefore, the mayor and city council of the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby mourn with the family of Carolyn Armanini, and we urge all citizens to join us in this special observance in the city of Lake Forest Park. Carolyn Armanini, December 3rd, 1949 to February 18th, 2023, signed this 9th day, March 2023, Jeff R. Johnson here.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, Mayor.
And on to our next proclamation. I've asked Councilmember Cassover to read. That is the proclamation on Women's History Month. Thank you, Kat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas American women of every race, class, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our nation in countless recorded and unrecorded ways, and whereas American women have played and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social roles in every sphere of life of the nation by constituting a significant portion of the labor force working inside and outside of the home. And whereas American women have played a unique role throughout the history of the nation by providing the majority of the volunteer labor force of the nation. And whereas American women were particularly important in the establishment of early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions in our nation. And whereas American women of every race, class, and ethnic background served as early leaders in the forefront of every major progressive social change movement. And whereas American women have served our country courageously in the military, and whereas American women have been leaders not only in securing their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and other movements, especially the peace movement, which create a more fair and just society for all. And whereas despite these contributions, the role of American women in history has been consistently overlooked and undervalued in the literature, teaching, and study of American history. Now, therefore, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Women's History Month in the City of Lake Forest Park, and we urge all citizens to join us in this special observance. Signed this 9th day of March 2023, Jeff R. Johnson, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we're going to move to, which we moved number 9, the final confirmation calendar up to this time. This is actually one of my favorite things that I get to do. Steve, would you like to introduce our newest candidate for the Planning Commission?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to introduce Cherie Finazzo. She's has a lot of experience dealing with school board related type activities, and has shown Mayor and Chair Larson and me that her willingness to get engaged with this sort of detailed work the Planning Commission does. So I'd like to give her the opportunity to come up and say a few words about why she wants to be on the Planning Commission.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Cherie Finazzo, and I'm really honored to have this position.
You can say more.
Oh, okay. I have 2 daughters. One is at Western, she's 19, and the other one's 24. And we have lived in Lake Forest Park for 23 years. So we moved here when our oldest was a year old. And we went through Lake Forest Park Elementary, Kellogg, and Shorecrest. And of those years, I had a in-home daycare. And so that allowed me to be at home with them and also be very involved with our PTA. I started out working in the library when they were young, and then worked up, I guess. I think a lot of the time it was, you know, Cherie, will you do this? And so I just stepped up and said, sure. So I know a lot of our neighbors, and I love Lake Forest Park. I hope my kids will continue to live here when they get older. Our oldest has a condo right now in Mount Lake Terrace. And so, you know, we hope to stick around this area.
Thank you. Council questions. Yes, Councilmember Bodie.
Welcome, and thank you for volunteering for this position. One of the questions I frequently ask is because when you come onto the commission, you are both a representative of the community and reaching out to other people in the community. So can you talk a little bit about that, wearing 2 hats, and you know, your view on that?
Well, I think I've always owned my own business, so I have really good customer relations, and I don't know, I'm not an I wouldn't call myself outgoing, but I don't shy away from talking to people. That has allowed me to really know my neighbors and really be able to step up and do a lot of the work with the PTA. I've been co-president 3 times. The last one was when our youngest was a senior. And so I led her committee, the Senior Spree Committee. I'm able to call in a lot of help. And I know that without a team, it's very difficult to get things done. So I'm looking forward to working on this team.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Castleworth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much for stepping forward to volunteer for the city. It's really important that we have citizens who are willing to do that. So it's just really heartening to see you here. Now, the Planning Commission is a group that has to really dig into a lot of detail. And I just wonder if you can talk a little bit about what about the Planning Commission itself, you know, intrigues you, and why this particular group was what you decided to step up to volunteer for.
I think my big interest is inclusiveness. I see that there are a lot of things that we can do better in this city. I think that the current plans for the little park over by the lake is a big one. I want to be involved in that. I want to kind of, you know, I hope that we can have everybody in Lake Forest Park enjoy it, not just a small group of people. I see that quite a bit. This just seems like it would fit right up to what I want to do. I want to find out what my neighbors would like to have done. I know there's been talk about bike lanes. I know there's a big issue with the trees being taken out on the main road out here. So I think transparency is also something that I really want to help with, so that people know what they're voting for when they're voting for things. I think that's the biggest thing right now with Sound Transit, is that a lot of the voters, it passed, so that, you know, we're now having to deal with sound transit along 104. So that's what I guess I like, that idea of being able to listen in and hopefully contribute to a better, I don't know, goal going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Deputy Mayor. Right.
Your mic over here. Well, thank you, first of all, very much for being willing to serve. I love the fact that you're deep roots in the community, and that as a product of the Shoreline School District myself, that your kids were part of that group. And also I think that it is, when we talk about commissions, there's really no prerequisite for commissions. And experience being a neighbor and a business owner and things like that. And I think probably one of the most interesting facets of your background too is your ability to deal with toddlers. And so you will be able to interface with us very, very well. Sorry, Mary, I had to beat you to that one. But I wanted to thank you for being willing to serve. And I appreciate your comments about bike lanes and mobility. Do you have any other thoughts about that you could expand on? Because the Planning Commission will be considering things like that definitely not in the immediate future, but down the line.
Right. So I'm in my 50s. And so I think about wheelchair accessibility and that type of stuff. So, you know, I love the idea of having a better area so that we can include our elderly as well. You know, oftentimes walks and that type of stuff, they're not included. So it would be nice to have something along that line so that they're welcomed as well. Especially with the new park that's being put in, it would be nice to, you know, make sure that we have like a load and unload zone and that type of stuff. Those small little details, you know, make a big difference. So.
Thank you very much. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure it resonates with all my colleagues up here as well. We all believe in multi-generational and multimodal and accessibility. And it's a shortage around our community that we really need to work on. So thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you. Summer, you have anything? Okay, anybody else? I'm actually going to say a couple words. She's kind of selling herself short. Maddie and I and Steve were pretty impressed. I ran into her a few times in a good way, but when she gets involved with something, she learns everything about it and studies and learns that stuff. And that's why Maddie and I were pretty impressed. She's not, like I said, she's not blowing her own horn right now, but she can just about handle anything that comes her way. So, and I was very excited to have somebody on that wasn't an expert on planning. We have a lot of people that know everything. We need people that deal with kids and have been through that. And we have a lot of stuff going on with our school district right now. So this is one of my favorite things right now is how much we've diversified our commissions and stuff and how excited I am. So with that, would anybody like to make a motion or?
Sure. Just to say, I've got to get your name up right so that I have that correctly. Okay. I'd like to move that we approve Sharif Anatso as a new planning commissioner for the city of Lake Forest Park.
Second,
Okay, it's been moved and
Please
second.
second.
second, third, and fourth.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Now on to our next nominee for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Michelle, you know me and name Michelle Allen. Corey, introduce our guest, and then I'm gonna ask our guest just to pretty much tell me exactly what you told me, and that'll be fine, okay?
Yeah, so Mayor and I, we interviewed Richie Allen a few weeks ago, and she attended the last Parks Board meeting as well, and she will have a lot of ideas bring into our park board, so I'll let her take it away.
Okay. Hi, good evening. I'm Richie Allen. I'm a 9-year resident of Lake Forest Park. I live just across the street. I have a 7-year-old. He used to attend Brookside Elementary, but he got into the magnet program. So we elected to have him attend the program at Meridian Park Elementary, where I'm actively participating in the PTA. And I will be honored to be part of the Parks and Recreation Board.
Okay, tell them how you spent your COVID weeks with your son.
Oh, yes. Like I told the mayor, I am an active seeker of recreation, especially with a 7-year-old. And since we've moved here, we've been going around parks, and after our talk, I thought I'd list down just to recall all the parks that I've been to, and I was surprised that my child and I have been to more than 70 plus parks all over the place, and that's only from Woodinville to Everett. And it's not even all the parks that we wanted. We're still, and I made another list of parks that we still have to go to, and there's still around 50 that we have to check out, and around 20 of them are parks that we visited multiple times. And that is what spurred me to want to volunteer in the Parks and Recreation Board, because of my experience of participating in visiting lots of parks and participating in the recreation programs of Edmonds, Mount Lake Terrace, and Shoreline, which the city is partnered with.
Pretty much, she's been to a couple parks or 2 or 3 a week during COVID, her and her son. She probably has been to more parks than all of us. And I thought, well, there we go. Somebody could actually say, well, that's not that cool a thing. I was at a park like that. And so I do have any questions for the park lady. Yes. Councilmember Castlever, then Deputy Mayor French.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rishi. I don't know if my microphone is on, is it? Yes, now it is. So I have a 7-year-old grandson who lives in Seattle, and we take him to parks too. So I'm going to have to come and talk to you about the best ones for a 7-year-old
Yes.
boy, because that sounds wonderful.
You
So
beat me
thank
to it.
you. Yeah, all right. Thank you so much for volunteering here. It's tremendously important to me as a council member that all of the families of Lake Forest Park are represented on our commissions, and to have somebody with a elementary age child on the commission is super important. I walk a lot up at Horizon View, and I see there at the playground, how important a playground is for building community, where you see parents talking to each other, kids getting to know each other, like before they even start school, and then keeping those friendships going once they've started school. So I wondered if you could just reflect on that a little bit, and what you think about here in Lake Forest Park, other than Horizon View, where else does that happen, that we see the building of community of young families?
I've noticed small kids enjoying and playing together at the new park that was opened across from Brookside Elementary. And that's getting a lot of use. I've seen kids in just, have a safe space and not with parents not having to worry of their kids darting across to the street and getting into an accident because it's fully fenced in. And so that's one park that I feel has served a great deal for parents with small children. And another one is the adjacent animal acres. Although there's a little bit of caution required because that's also a park for dogs. So there's, my husband especially is very weary of having dogs around our child because dogs can be unpredictable, although they are friendly. So those are the two places that I can think of. And I've also noticed, and we visited several times, that that really is the only park that I could think of in the city that has a good playground is the one across from Animal Acres. And we're very thankful that that was developed. That's fully fenced in as well. It's a small playground, but it's really nice. So we enjoy it a lot. Although, my kid now doesn't want to go there because he says it's too
big.
babyish. He's 7 and he says it's too babyish for him. So, I am keen on being part of the Park and Recreation Board and giving my input in the development of the park that was just purchased. I mean, the property that was just purchased. I hope we can add a playground to it as well. It's similar to how Log Boom is structured. You have a playground and you have a beach access, and it's a really great place for families to recreate in. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you so much for being willing to volunteer. I have a 7-year-old as well. She was actually at the ribbon cutting ceremony at the Tots Park that you referred to, and she is now declared, I think last summer, that she is too old to play there. That's for the little kids, even though she's 7. But what is you're not going to hurt our feelings by telling us what's your favorite park that you visited overall? Doesn't have to be in Lake Forest Park.
Well, we love Lion Creek because of the access to the beach. My child thinks it's there's a space there that he likes to explore, that he thinks it's his secret fourth. So that's one that's in the city, but personally, my favorite is the Yesler Terrace Park in Seattle, because it has a spray park. It has a nice playground, Yesler.
Yeah, I know.
And then for parents, you have a beautiful view of Mount Rainier.
Yeah.
And
I know,
the
sure.
Puget Sound. So it's like, and anytime we have the opportunity to go there, and it's easily accessible by public transport, we just take the 522, the light rail, and then get off at Capitol Hill and take the car, another rail car, and that's it. It's such a accessible, beautiful place, and I'd bring a binocular, and then you can really enjoy with your child. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for being willing to serve.
Councilmember Bodie.
Yes, thank you very much and welcome. And thank you for attending the last Parks and Recreation Board meeting and hearing a lot about what they were thinking about working on for the year ahead. Your expertise in parks is just mind blowing. So as a parent of grown-up children, I'm impressed at your energy. But a question I have is, so another aspect of being on the board is reaching out to your neighbors and the rest of the community. And can you share any thoughts you have on that as well?
Oh yeah, once I am part of the Parks and Recreation Board, I intend to reach out to parents of small kids so we can kind of discuss the finalities of activities that we can recommend and start in Lake Forest Park. And then also I am concerned about other age groups, for like, for example, middle grade kids and high school kids, and also recreation for our elderly population. And that is coming from my experience participating in the recreation programs of Shoreline. And so I've joined their field trips, where they have places that they would go to with older adults. And I am looking forward to maybe replicating that, but with families. I guess there and until I understand that there are issues with liability, and so I'm looking forward to researching more of it and overcoming that hurdle so kids can go to places together and create communities. And because it's Lake Forest Park, it's I would like to see kids in Lake Forest Park recreating together and forming groups and forming lasting friendships until they're adulthood.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, yes.
Hi, and thank you, Ms. Allen, for stepping up, and really appreciate your enthusiasm for parks. I'm going to ask you a question that has nothing to do with your parks experience, but on your application, you mentioned a group called Roots. What is that?
Yes.
What is that?
Oh, I'm a board member of Roots. It's a young adult homeless shelter in the U District. And Miss Amanda Brown, who's presenting for Metro, what used to be the president of that board. So it's the same thing as youth care, but we're very small, and we're basically one location in the University District.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
If there are no more questions, I'd like to go ahead and move for confirmation. Rashida Allen, partial term appointment to position 7, expiring February 28th, 2024 for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
Second.
And moving to second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Nays? Passes unanimously.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I think I have a bunch of people up here would take a trip to Yesler Terrace now.
Splash Park.
Yeah, wow, it sounded pretty fun to me. so.
August.
Thank you two very much. As usual, folks, I'm pretty excited. I'm really glad to see when we're celebrating Women's Month, we have 2 wonderful women joining our commissions. And so we thank you very much. Thank you, council. And with that, we're going to move on to, I got to flip the page. Oh, the Link Light Reel presentation. You got them up there? Okay, this is a presentation on the Link Light Rail. I'm going to be nice to you. I will just introduce you as Corey, Luke, and Amanda. It's better than messing up back name, but last names, because I even say that. So welcome very much, and we're waiting forward to hear your presentation. And I will put just one quick thing is I grew up in Mount Lake Terrace, and I go to Lynnwood all the time, and I don't even know where I'm at anymore up there on 44. So thanks for doing that to me. So appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if Richie's still there, you guys are so lucky to have her. She's just a wonderful, and it was just been a pleasure serving with her. So very excited for the city to have her on the commission. But we are here from King County Metro. So thank you so much for having us this evening. We, as I mentioned, my name is Amanda Pleasant Brown. I'm the government relations jurisdictional lead for King County Metro. And I'm joined by my colleagues, Corey Holder, who's our project manager for the Lynnwood Link Connections project. And we've got Luke Distelhorst, who does our community engagement. And so we're here just to give you a brief overview of phase 2 of our Lynnwood Link Connections project, which is meant to restructure the bus around the Link light rail. And so our phase 2 started on January 9th and will actually end tomorrow. And so this is the first time the public has had an opportunity to look at our draft network that we put together after our phase 1 feedback. So this is a really exciting time for us to continue to get feedback and then be able to produce an additional draft network, and we'll just keep moving towards a final draft network. So I will pass it over to my colleague, Corey Holder, and I will share my screen just momentarily.
Thanks, Amanda.
Can you see
So
it?
this is looks good. All right, so my name is Corey Holder. I'm the project manager with service planning at King County Metro, so project manager for the Lynnwood Link Connections project. Really excited to be here with you tonight, not just as project manager of this project, but I also live just a few blocks north of Lake Forest Park on the Mount Lake Terrace side. So a bit of my backyard here, spending a good amount of time in Lake Forest Park as well. So happy to see y'all. All right, so for a bit of background on the Lynnwood Link Connections project, so in 2024 and 2026, Sound Transit will be opening 5 new light rail stations extending north from Seattle all the way up to Lynnwood. Some new stations in Shoreline South at 148, Shoreline North at 185th, Mount Lake Terrace, and Lynnwood City Center. And then following that in 2026, the 5th station will open on Northeast 130th Street in North Seattle. In addition to those changes, as you're all aware, Sound Transit's also working on the new bus rapid transit line on the State Route 522 corridor. So also looking at that. So kind of in response to these changes, Metro initiated a mobility project to look at kind of optimizing our network around these new assets coming online, and adjusting to new mobility needs. Point out, we're working closely with Sound Transit on this project, not just around the link opening, but also thinking about how that BRT will impact our network. And I'll also like to point out that concurrently, Community Transit has also been carrying out a network redesign around this expansion. And one change that will impact King County is they're looking at extending their Swift Blue line to hit the Shoreline South stations. That would bring that, Aurora connection into the Shoreline side for a closer connection. So project scope on this. So what we're looking at for changes are there's 22 routes in our project focus we're looking at. So these are routes that currently travel near one of those upcoming link stations, or potentially are duplicating pathways that link extension will do. So that involves 14 all-day routes in the area and 8 peak-only routes. And by those peak-only routes, kind of referring to those kind of more traditional, 8 to 5 commuter hour type services. So looking at those as ones for potential change, and just highlighting on the map, kind of the yellowed area here, we see that's our project area that we're really focusing on for our engagement. As well as our equity analysis. So really trying to connect there primarily for the folks that, live or travel within this area that are going to be impacted most by these changes. So our project goals, we have 4 main goals for the Lynnwood Link project we're looking at. Number one, first and foremost, is improving mobility for priority populations who are an important part of our current and future rider base. And at Metro, we define priority populations as Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, lower limited income folks, people with disabilities, diverse language speakers, and immigrant and refugee populations. So second, we want to make sure we're equitably informing and engaging and empowering with our current and potential customers traveling in this project area. So making a special effort that we are hearing from those priority populations and how the changes will benefit them. Third, looking at delivering an integrated service that responds to this link expansion and changes in the network. So really delivering a network that's not duplicating what Link is doing, but complements it so folks can get, more places, more times a day. And lastly, looking to improve the efficiency, effectiveness, and environmental sustainability of the transit system. So moving people efficiently and, not duplicating efforts. And with that, I will hand off to Luke for an update on engagement.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Luke Distelhorst. I'm the Community Engagement Lead for the Lynnwood Link Connections project. So right now, as Amanda mentioned earlier, tomorrow is the last day of our phase 2 public engagement, where we are gathering this feedback about the service concepts that we've put out there, and we'll be making changes to the network to bring it to a phase 3 service proposal for further public feedback. So overall, this is kind of just getting past that halfway point in our process. In early 2022, phase 1 engagement allowed our communities to identify their mobility needs, and our mobility and partner review boards helped refine these needs and guide the project team in developing the service concepts that we are sharing today. And just for background, our mobility board is made up of residents who live or work in the project area, and our partner review board includes jurisdictional staff, such as from your city, partner agencies, and local organizations. During phase 2, we're gathering feedback on how well the concept network addresses those community priority needs we heard from phase 1, considering the trade-offs we must make within this project budget. Given that this is the first time people are seeing the concept network, we're really looking for that detailed and specific feedback and any questions or gaps that people see as they review these routes. Having that very specific feedback from our communities will really help that we can further develop and refine the service concept to produce a more final service proposal in phase 3. And so once we have that proposal, we go back out to the public again to collect additional feedback on ways to refine and improve it before we go to the King County Council approval process. We don't yet have a final timeline on our phase 3 engagement. You'll see that big yellow box down there in the right-hand corner. As Sound Transit is still finalizing some opening dates for various link extensions, but we're working really closely with our partners and kind of planning right now for that phase 3 engagement to happen during probably this summer, 2023. I'll hand it back to Corey now.
Thanks, Luke. So before we kind of go over the network, I want to go over a few key network assumptions we're making in developing this network. So first and foremost, what we're proposing shows kind of the final network of all the elements in place together. So as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 link stations opening in 2024, but then another later in 2026 with the 130th, and also the Stride 522 BRT coming later. So the proposal we have, assumes all of these at the same time of what that network would look like. So there may be some phased implementation of some of the changes depending on when things open. Second, this proposal is a budget neutral proposal, so there are no additional service investments at this time. So what we're looking at is, of those project area routes identified earlier that I mentioned, those 23 routes, of kind of redistributing hours from those to optimize this network. So that does involve trade-offs as we look at it. So if we're increasing frequency in one area or adding new coverage, it means we've pulled from somewhere else in the existing network to fund that. Lastly, we have to keep in mind capital constraints as we make proposals. So for example, we can only deliver a set number of new stops or improvements due to both either timeline or budget constraints. And also, while recognizing those constraints, we work closely with city partners on how we can help meet those needs as best as possible to deliver a network that meets community travel needs. So I'd like to talk a bit about what brought us to this concept network we have now, of what informed it. So at the beginning, we're really starting with data and analysis of what we could see for ridership. So looking at origin and destination travel trends, where are places we see people are traveling between or wanting to travel between. Second, looking at equity priority areas. So those are the areas within our project area that have the highest numbers of those priority populations I described earlier. So I want to pay special attention that we are serving those areas of need. And also looking at our current ridership data. So looking at crowding, productivity, ridership by stop. So looking at analysis of what we've seen to date on routes. Second, community input played a huge part in this network proposal. So looking at that phase 1 survey, where we're doing the needs assessment. So what did we hear were needs? What have we heard from riders? Either out in the field tabling, customer service comments, so looking at all those pieces. Working with our mobility board, as Luke mentioned earlier, but mobility board kind of really helping identify what those priorities are from what we've heard. And also those partner review boards or jurisdictional comments. And then lastly, also keeping in mind capital considerations of where do we have limitations of roadways we can't operate on, or, is there inability to build stops in places? So also considering that as a constraint. But overall, looking at that, brought that together, our community input informed our top mobility needs, which I'll talk about in a moment. Also informing what are the important destinations people want to get to, or what are those important connections. So those mobility needs I'll talk about of the phase 1 needs that inform the concept network. So this is kind of what our mobility board identified should be our priorities that we try to address in the proposal. So the biggest one we heard was creating new and improved east-west transit connections. So I'll kind of show some highlights in it a bit. Making sure that we're providing transit to important community identified destinations where priority populations live or are traveling to. And also looking at locations where we know there's kind of new dense housing coming online by the time this light rail opens. Third, we heard a big demand for improving nighttime transit service. I heard priority for maintaining and improving frequencies on routes to major destinations. So looking at providing frequency where we can that's connecting to Stride or Link, important destinations. Weekend service we heard is an important need for the community. And I think that's something, as ridership has changed since the pandemic, we've definitely seen weekend transit use really pick up more kind of relative to those traditional travel times. And lastly, ensuring that these transit transfers are convenient, accessible, and reliable. So looking at where we can make frequent to frequent connections as we can between the services. So on the right here is a map showing the, let's see, there we go. On the right, we have a map showing the network proposal in here, and I'll talk a bit about how this addresses some of the needs those priority needs that were identified. So east-west connections, as mentioned, was the top priority. And kind of on the map here where we have red lines on the map are frequent services. Additionally, I'll point out the orange line on there of the Stride 522 service also, but these are the frequent services in the network. So this kind of brings in some new east-west connections that intersect with Link Light Rail. So proposals on 130th, 145th, 155th, new service across 175th and Shoreline. And also, that Stride service coming from Lake Forest Park across 145th to the Link, providing another one of those east-west connections. So also looking at prioritizing, let me go back one, Amanda, sorry. Prioritizing those pathways that serve our community identified destinations, also serving the equity priority areas I mentioned, which are the grayed in areas on the map. So where we have those gray kind of equity priority areas, trying to provide services we can there. For the third piece, as well as looking at filling that nighttime service gap. On average on this network, routes in the proposal run about 40 minutes later into the evening than they do today. And I will point out one proposal that serves Lake Forest Park in here with the proposed route 334, which would replace today's route 331. This one runs, I think, about 4 hours later into the evening in the proposal than the 331 does today. So that would be an example of Lake Forest Park where there's a much later night service than there would be today. Fourth priority was looking at the maintaining and improving frequency. So we tried to make frequent routes where we can, as indicated by the red and orange lines on the map being frequent routes. And a result of this, 19% more people within the project study area would have access to a frequent transit service compared to today. By frequent service, there's a 15-minute or better service throughout the day. So it's a 19% increase would have access to that level of service. Weekend service as well, filling in that gap. One route in the proposal is route 324, which would run between Bothell and Lake City. That one would offer night service on that route that doesn't exist compared to today with Route 372. So it's an example in Lake Forest Park where we added a weekend service that was not there, or where we would add weekend services not there with the proposal. And lastly, just providing frequent to frequent transfers between the major destinations. So, as pointed out, we've got a lot of these east-west lines on the map intersecting with those new link stations. So providing connections there, or providing, connections to other key destinations like Shoreline Community College, have a number of routes heading that way in the proposal. So concept network trade-offs, as I mentioned, this is a budget neutral proposal, so we do have to trade-offs of providing frequency to get there. One way moving toward that was reducing some of those peak only services to improve the all-day and frequent service. And the way of doing that is restructuring the north-south connection where Link really acts as that north-south spine. So by providing allowing that north-south spine to operate, we can, in the proposal, put more frequency in those kind of east-west connections that will provide frequent service to that spine and kind of more service throughout the day, where it's not just at the peak, but folks can travel, midday, nights, weekends. And also looking at areas where we did see unproductive or low ridership services. So if there are segments where folks have not been riding, looking at how we can better align what kind of service is there to provide more frequency to kind of the key connections on the network. And I will hand it back to Luke.
Great, thanks, Corey. And so I know we're just at the very end of our phase 2, but we'll just touch briefly on kind of what we've done over these last 9 weeks. Thanks, Amanda. So since phase 2 is the first time the public gets to review the network, it includes a few different items than you see on your screen here when compared to phase 1. We're still collecting primarily feedback through an online survey, which has had really very solid engagement so far. We've also partnered with local community-based organizations to support our outreach and have hosted a few really specific meetings with community groups and key audiences, which I'll talk about in a minute. We did also host 3 virtual open houses. Those are available on our project website as recordings, and they do include language interpretation in 3 additional languages. So after this engagement ends, we'll go over the results with our mobility board and partner review boards, like we did after phase 1, to help evaluate and prioritize the feedback to develop that phase 3 proposal. And just a few of the items I wanted to highlight in our general outreach in the second phase. So one being the amount of in-person outreach that we've done, primarily at transit centers, park and rides, high ridership locations, and some community locations as well. I think in total, we've had about 15 hours per week for the entire project, just doing that in-person outreach. And it's been a really big driver and a great place to have conversations with riders as they're out experiencing the system and hearing from them about what's working well people and really what they want to see in the future to give them more transportation and mobility options. So lastly, a key component of our outreach work is having established paid partnerships with local community-based organizations. So we have 4 groups working with us during this phase: the Lake City Collective, Compass Housing, 18 Seeds, which is an affiliate of the Ethnic Chamber of Commerce Coalition, and Black Coffee Northwest. And these partnerships are really trying to integrate our work into the outreach and engagement that these organizations are already doing in their communities, with a special focus on priority populations. So in addition to promoting the survey and our other engagement opportunities and events, they will also be providing qualitative feedback to us. So after this engagement ends, they write a report and give that to us, and it also goes alongside all of those survey results and other engagements that we have for us to analyze as part of our feedback. I will say a few weekends ago, we were at Black Coffee Northwest during a Saturday Black-owned business market and met a Lake Forest Park resident who is an organizer of a local neighborhood group. And it was really great to connect with that individual and be able to connect with them online and get them information so they could post and help make more contacts in the Lake Forest Park community with our project. So as I mentioned, we got one more day. Tomorrow is the last day on our survey. All of our materials are available in our 12 project languages listed here. As always, if there are other language access needs that people have, we will absolutely translate and make those available to folks. I was looking at our survey results earlier today. So these are not cleaned and verified results, but I did see that I think Lake Forest Park had like the 4th most survey responses. So we have some data analysis and cleaning to do, but it's been great to see that we have had a lot of folks from your city engaged and part of this process. We're also always looking for ways to improve and incorporate more voices in our work, and trying to find new ways to engage with our riders and communities. While we're still finishing phase 2, some of us are already looking ahead and planning for phase 3. And so if there are key contacts, organizations, groups in your community that would be great for us to connect with, we're always open and ready to work with you all to make sure that we can include more folks in our process. So now I'll hand it back to Amanda.
Thank you so much. So that was the conclusion of our presentation, and I can stop sharing my screen, and we would love if there's feedback that you have or questions, we are happy to answer them.
Sure do. Councilmember Cassover.
Yes, and thank you so much, Luke, Corey, and Amanda. I'm Philippa Cassover, and I am the chair of the Seashore Transportation Commission. So we've met before, and I've been following along with this project. I understand that Metro has a focus on high need communities, and that Lake Forest Park doesn't fall into that category. However, as I look at the map, it does concern me that there are few opportunities for folks in Lake Forest Park who do not want to use their cars to actually access any of the transit opportunities that are out there. I'm particularly sad that the 185th Street station does not appear to be served by any bus routes that might be available to Lake Forest Park residents. And I just wondered what your thoughts are about that 185th Street station. It has no parking, so it will be a station that will only be able to be accessed by folks who live within walk or biking distance, or who can get there on a bus. So I'm curious about that. I wasn't really clear from the map whether our bus line that runs up Ballinger Way, and is it the 334, this new one, will it go to the Mount Lake Terrace station? Will that be a connection that people can make? So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Yeah, that Route 334 is oriented in the proposal to serve the Mount Lake Terrace station. I think that's one of the reasons I think you're not seeing the 185th station being the connection, was kind of choosing one of those as I think the closest connector. So looking at Mount Lake Terrace on that. But that is an interesting question for folks of whether they would kind of prefer it of 185th or Mount Lake Terrace. But I was kind of viewing that the Mount Lake Terrace connection, offers also a lot of other transfer opportunities as well. So there's kind of a number of routes that will be serving that station.
But
And-
there's nothing really for Lake Forest Park to get to the 185th. Am I right with that?
Yeah, that's correct. I'd say the two link connections from Lake Forest Park that are in this proposal would be the 334 to Mount Lake Terrace, or the Stride BRT to the 148th station via 145th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Farahani?
And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, King County and Metro folks, for a great presentation. I'm writer of the 372, which will probably become the lamented 372. I think that's being discontinued. But nevertheless, my question has to do with the priority populations. You have probably an estimate of the number of people that fall in that category in Lake Forest Park. Would you be willing to share that number?
Yeah, as far as kind of the equity priority areas we're showing on the map, so it's done at the block group level, and the ones that are kind of ranked 1 through 5 of all the block groups in the county. So the ones that rank 4 and 5 are the ones kind of shaded on the map as priority areas. So definitely there's priority populations within each one. So I'd have to take a look of how kind of what ranking the Lake Forest Park ones have as well.
Councilmember, I'd be happy to follow up
Yeah.
with you after the presentation.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Councilmember Goldman?
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I'm also on the Seashore Transportation Board, so we've met by there and I've attended one of the open houses. I have a general question and then I have a route specific question. So the general question, you've mentioned that these revisions need to be service neutral. And my question is, my understanding is that compared to before the pandemic, service hours have been reduced. And so why is it that Metro seems to be effectively be locking in sort of this pandemic era austerity?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something maybe I should have clarified earlier, that the budget neutral is kind of based on the pre-pandemic baseline of the routes in the service area. So that does assume restoration of anything that's currently suspended.
Okay.
So
And
it's
then-
budget neutral, compared to 2020, beginning of 2020. But if you look at the restoration, it would actually be an increase relative to what's on the street today.
Okay, thanks. And then my specific route question involves the 324.
Okay.
I agree with Metro. I think there is value in connecting the North Shore cities with the Lake City neighborhood of Seattle. Currently, that is served by both the 522 and the 372. So on average, it's about every 8 minutes or so there's a bus. The proposed 324 would only run every half hour. And I don't have a car, so I take the bus every day. Got to this meeting by the 372. And my question is, my experience, kind of like the dark days of the 522, is that I would charitably describe it as barely usable when it only ran every half hour. And so my question is, how useful might this 324 be if it's running fairly infrequently, especially compared to the Stride line?
I think, one thing we're looking at it with it, that it would in a lot of ways kind of complement the Stride line that would be running kind of, up to every 8-minute frequency. So that would be providing kind of one connection through there. Whereas the 324 would also add some kind of overlay with some additional more local stops on there. So I think, between the two, there's some, some usability there, but also, I guess, thinking about, the 30-minute service is some, one of those discussions we kind of have with writers of, is that coverage trade-off worth it versus frequency? So something we look at of providing the coverage, or is it, or, we prefer just kind of more frequency spread elsewhere.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, but I'm gonna make one comment. We got billions of dollars into this whole project, where a lot of money and time's going into it. But I really hope that there's a whole section on how you guys are gonna keep it safe for everybody to use. Safe and clean, because I will tell you, the first time somebody gets on that and tries to go to SeaTac, if they have a bad experience, they're probably not gonna get back on. So it's real important to me, or to everybody, that when this thing opens up, it needs to be ready to go and everybody enjoys their ride, because we need it to get back to full and so we can use it. And that's coming from a guy who owns a auto repair shop and a gas station. So I know how important this is. So please make it ready to go. Okay. Thank you very much. You guys are doing a great job, great presentation, and we hope to see you again at the end of phase 3 or in the middle of phase 3, I guess. So
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. And I just want to say thank you for the questions and thank you for the feedback. And absolutely at Metro, we are working to make our services safe and clean so that people can ride the bus and we're the first choice. So thank you for the feedback and we are working on it. Really, truly. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council, with that, we will move on to a public hearing. Oh, no, yeah, we're public hearing, right? Then citizens comment. Steve? We're gonna have a public hearing on ordinance number 23-1264, renewing interim development regulations authorized by the Growth Management Act relating to indoor emergency shelters and housing, transitional housing, and permanent supportive housing.
Thank you, Mayor. This regulation is being renewed for a third time. It was first adopted as an emergency or an interim developed regulation in September of 2021. And it was in response to state legislation that said cities should not be allowed to prohibit indoor emergency shelters or indoor emergency housing in certain zones, as well as not prohibiting transitional and permanent supportive housing in most residential zones. The statute does allow for cities to adopt reasonable occupancy, spacing, and intensity of use restrictions on all of these types of housing. And so that's what the city went through and did, was establish that they were allowed and that there were certain restrictions for them. And so one of the things that led to this third renewal of this interim ordinance is that we've been waiting for guidance from the Department of Commerce on the targets that we need to establish for a permanent set of regulations. And so on last week, March 2nd, we did get notice that the Department of Commerce has finalized its guidance for counties and cities, but it's going to be incumbent upon the cities and their respective county to work out the distribution of the capacity needed in each city. So bottom line is we need additional time to complete that process and finalize capacity targets for Lake Forest Park.
Thank you, Steve. Do I have any questions from the council? Okay, seeing none. At this time, I'll open the public hearing for comments. If you'd like to make a comment, you have 3 minutes. Just state your name. Chief, do we have anybody signed up for comments for the public hearing? Okay. This is the public hearing one, right? Oh, that's public. Yeah, this is by citizens comment. Sorry. Okay, is there anybody online to speak on this?
If you want to address the council, please use the raise hand function. Doesn't look like it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Are you asking for public comment?
On this subject. Okay, yeah, we're gonna have public comment after this again, so seeing no public comments on ordinance 23-1264, I will close the public hearing at this time. And we'll move on to ordinance 23-1264.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to go ahead and move, waive our 10 touch rule on this item. I apologize. We've only touched this 7 times now. I'd like to go ahead and move ordinance 23-1264, renewing interim housing development regulations relating to emergency shelters and housing, transitional housing, and permanent supportive housing.
Second.
Moving second. Do I have any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of ordinance 23-1264, renewing interim development regulations relating to energy shelters and housing, transitional housing, and permanent supportive housing, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Pass unanimously. Thank you, council. With that, we will now move on to citizens' comments. And the first one up would be Nell Miller. Welcome, Nell.
My name is Nell Miller. 2 of my good friends and I live at 18269 35th Avenue Northeast in Lake Forest Park. After touring and pricing senior living homes and other alternatives, we decided to move in together, share expenses, and care for one another. This was our retirement plan. Our only driveway features a small bridge that spans Lyon Creek. We noticed recently that the bridge had more give than previously. Vehicles stopped using it. Then 2 of us put our feet through the deck planks. A subsequent inspection found that a majority of the planks of this 50-year-old bridge were rotten and needed immediate repair. A stop work order was posted the day the contractors began the repair. Losing the bridge is an emergency in so many ways. The property is landlocked. Currently, the only access to our home is through our neighbor's backyard. We have to pay for this emergency access. Nevertheless, the neighbor could refuse us passage through his yard at any time. There is no on-street parking nearby. We are all in our late 70s. All of us suffer from chronic diseases. We are very dependent on local medical sources, including EMTs. Without a bridge, the EMTs can no longer get onto our property. Rapid response is critical if one of us were to have a heart attack or a stroke. Medications, like insulin needing refrigeration, are being left on the other side of the bridge where we cannot see them. At least one package was stolen. I hope the thief has a cat because it contained 42 pounds of cat litter. Not having a bridge has eliminated essential services. We cannot get to our trash bins and so have had to drive our trash to the transfer station. We have to drive to Amazon Hub to pick up packages. We have to drive to get the mail. 2 of us had car accidents soon after we started driving more. Restoring these missing services is critical and urgent. This situation is untenable. We are asking for your help to get a repaired bridge in place before we have another medical emergency and someone dies while waiting for emergency help. City Hall staff has been very helpful, but we need more. We are drowning in a bureaucratic cloud. Suddenly, plans for what should have been an emergency repair of an aging bridge must be approved by several agencies. According to prior owners, the stream has never come close to breaching the current bridge. Council members, please talk to your staff and encourage them to be proactive in solving this urgent problem. This is an emergency that requires your immediate and urgent attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tom Bird.
Thank you very much. I'm Tom Bird. I live on 37th Northeast, just 2 or 3 blocks from Bothell Way. And that's what I wanted to talk about. I really want to sort of follow up Tuesday evening's meeting that was in the Lake Forest Park School about ST3 project. I know several of you were there, and I really appreciate that, and thank you for being there. The key thing I want to address is it was very obvious that the community is I think I can use the word shocked that there hasn't been an environmental impact study of the ST3 proposal through Lake Forest Park. It's my understanding that that was sort of bypassed and was not thought to be necessary by ST3. The community simply can't believe that. It makes no sense. Maybe that was before they decided to take down all the trees. I don't know. But I wanted to give 3 reasons that I thought about today to bring that back to your attention. And I really urge you to formally ask ST3 to do an environmental impact study. The first reason clearly is for the removal of 490 trees. I mean, if that doesn't have an environmental impact, what does? I mean, I can't imagine that the removal of 490 trees doesn't have an environmental impact. I brought some show and tell. This is today's Seattle Times. The front page article is the controversy over removing 8 trees near the Pike Place Market. 8 trees. And we're talking about 490. I mean, front page news arguing over 8 trees. The second thing is I actually walked some of that route this morning, and I hadn't really appreciated the Boerschelt Creek. I know I'm mispronouncing that, but it's the creek that goes under the highway and down next door to the Sheridan Market. That has the highway goes over that creek. There's a bridge that spans that creek. And the plan, as far as I can tell, is for the new ST3 project to work on that bridge and to actually change that bridge in some ways. And there's no way they can do that without impacting that creek. Apparently, they have said that their project will not impact the creek. That's impossible. That bridge goes over the creek. They're going to change that bridge. You can't do that without impacting the creek. And it's supposedly a potential salmon creek that feeds into the lake. The third thing, walking that route this morning, and maybe you all are aware of that. I was not. On the other side, the south side of the bank of the creek, the immediate next neighbor is a microbiology, virology testing center. I looked at their website. They do testing of E. coli, hepatitis, parasites. One has to wonder if every day 5-ton trucks go back and forth in front of that testing facility. What if there's a crack in the floor or a crack in the wall? E. coli, hepatitis, parasites next to a creek that flows into the lake? Environmental impact? I think so. Maybe not really, but has anyone talked to that facility? Has ST3 talked to the microbiology, virology office and lab and asked them whether all those 5-ton trucks will make a difference to their facility? That I think that's part of environmental impact that has to be asked. So for those 3 reasons that I've just presented, I think I really urge you to ask ST3 to do an environmental impact study. I know, Lori, you said that it would be very, very difficult to get them to change their mind. And I understand that, but that's not the same as impossible, right? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I think there is environmental impact of that project and it needs to be studied. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody online?
If you're online and want to address the council, please use the raise hand function. Doesn't look like it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience like to speak? Okay, nobody online?
Oh, wait, we have. I think we had Mr. Stetzer there online for a brief moment.
He's back.
Okay. Jim, you there? You're muted.
Okay, I am unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. This will be very quick. I want to echo and endorse the plea of my neighbor, Nell Miller. The bridge in question was built in 1981 by yours truly, Jim and Kathy Stetzer. We used to own the property in question. We built the bridge, very substantial. 43 years later, guess what? It needed repair. It needed emergency repair. I would like the council to know and staff to know and Fish and Wildlife to know that in the entire 40 plus years that I have lived on that property or across the street, that bridge has never been breached. There's been heavy water, but it's never gone over the top of that bridge. I have, by the way, some photos of the big rainfall we had recently. This is a repair of a bridge with an emergency situation. And whether it's staff, and I know they're working hard, or Fish and Wildlife that has their understandable agendas, we need to cut through the bureaucratic fog and get these people access before somebody dies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim, very much. Anybody else? Okay, see no one else. We will close citizens' comments at this time. Thank you. Okay, with that, we're gonna move on to the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Consent calendar has been moved in second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, sounds good. Man, totally lost. I don't know where I can't find my number 10. Oh, there we go. Or just resolutions for introduction and referral. Andy, are you with us?
I am.
There you are. Good, thank you. First one up is resolution 23/1885, authorizing the mayor to sign water quality combined financial assistance agreement number WQC 2023 LAF OED 00102. Man, I did that pretty good. With the Washington Department of Ecology for the Lake Forest Park Stormwater Management Plan. You want to talk about both? So you want me to introduce both?
I'm sorry, Mayor, both meaning,
Well, you got, you're talking about resolution 23.
oh, the second, I'm sorry, the second resolution. Up to you. You can introduce them both now or one at a time.
We'll just do
No
one at a
difference.
time since I interrupted. So go ahead.
No worries. Well, thank you, Mayor and council members for the time. So yeah, this resolution would authorize the mayor to sign a funding agreement with the Department of Ecology, and the funding would support the development of project delivery tools that are intended to, essentially help DPW react with greater nimbleness, flexibility to changes that may occur during the implementation phase of this stormwater management action plan that we're actually just about done developing at this point. And it's funded out of the department's stormwater financial assistance program. So in this funding cycle, there were several components of the city's, standard or prescribed stormwater management program that's set by the NPDES municipal stormwater permit that were eligible. So we applied for support with this process, the stormwater management action planning process, and were awarded these funds. This is $90,750, and it does require a local match, but the good news there is that expenditures that the city has already contracted with its engineering consultant, parametrics, to develop the stormwater management action plan, those are eligible to be used as matching contributions. So we're able to access this $90,000+ in funding with no new spending required on our end. And we get some, I trust, what will be some needed and effective tools to help us just deliver the work that is laid out in this plan, particularly the capital project type work, or the things that involve contracting, is really what these tools are aimed at, more effectively. Enable us to do that. Leverage technology to get that work done more efficiently. So that is the nature of the agreement in a nutshell, I suppose. Be happy to address any questions.
Any questions? Yes, Councilmember Fairtime.
Hi, and thanks, Manager Sylvia, for a presentation on the on this idea. I'm trying to translate National Science Foundation E's into state E's, because the way the grants are structured are significantly different. So is an indirect rate of 0% typical for these kinds of things?
Indirect rate of 0%.
It says approved indirect costs rate. So for me, that would be overhead. And it says 0%. So it looks like they folded the administration part into, explicitly called it out as a line item instead of charging us a percent overhead.
Yeah, so let me see if I'm not even sure that detail was discussed, honestly, in my negotiations with their project manager. There are some grants, like we have some grants from the Department of Commerce in which we're awarded $103,000, and Commerce essentially keeps $3,000 for their own administrative expenses.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way this one works. If we're referring to the same thing.
Yes.
We receive. We requested this amount of money. We're granted this amount of money, and Ecology's administration and review services are essentially on the house, to us.
Okay, cool. May I continue? Yeah. Okay, and on point. So there's no nice way to put this on the grants that I've been part of. I've had to write my support in explicitly. In other words, X% of my salary comes from this grant. Is any part of your salary coming from this grant?
It is not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions? Yeah, anybody like to move this?
No,
It's just, oh, it's not motion, oh, it's just,
This is our first touch.
oh, first touch.
Yeah. This is our first touch, right, Andy?
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we'd like to move the zero touch rule. Okay, that's not, so, okay, sorry. Okay, well, then we're gonna move on to resolution 23-1886, authorizing the mayor to sign supplemental number 1 WSDOT local program state funding agreement number LA 9515 and WSDOT project Prospectus from SR 104 Lion Creek Culvert project.
Thanks again, Mayor. So separate funding agreement, separate project. This one is an existing funding agreement that the city originally executed with the Department of Transportation back in 2018. And at that time, the project that was the subject of our application for funding that was described in the funding agreement was a much larger project than we're planning to complete today. The largest change to the project, essentially the scope of the project has changed. Just to kind of cut to the chase a little bit, the scope of the project has changed to such an extent that WSDOT requires us to just memorialize, what it is that the funding supports, what the total cost of the project is, WSDOT share. That's changed quite a bit since 2018, and I can, walk through quickly as I can, what those changes have been, but it's kind of an administrative exercise just to keep the content of the agreement, like what has been agreed upon, current with what the project actually is. It doesn't affect how much money the city has access to or what the funding will support generally. It has been from the beginning and will continue to support the design cost for this project. so it's really just an acknowledgement of you know, how much of the scope and sort of big picture details of the project has changed. And so just briefly, you know, what those changes include are actually, well, so when the city applied for this funding, the notion was that this project would include replacement of 4 culverts, and that the city and WSDOT would execute a separate interagency agreement for replacement of 2 of the 4. That's one of the culverts, and these are the 2 that are essentially WSDOT's responsibility, or they own them and are responsible for maintaining them. So there's a culvert under State Route 104, and there's an adjacent culvert on private property that essentially needs to be replaced if the state's culvert under the state highway is ever replaced. And so those 2 culverts were spun off into a separate WSDOT project. I wasn't there for the, you know, how that exactly took place. That what I've gathered of the story is that the headwinds associated with acquiring that private property were, I think, more than the city bargained for originally, and you know, WSDOT pretty readily agreed to, you know, just take ownership of that half, essentially, of the project. Again, this was like 5 years ago, and they are currently, they're at about, actually, we just received their 60% design plans for that project. They are planning to construct it next year. So those culvert replacements are still very much happening. It's just part of a separate project that WSDOT is managing. The other change to the project occurred last summer. The 2 city-owned culverts, you know, kind of similar story on one of them. There were some right-of-way acquisition challenges that it inspired the city to just sort of, you know, separate that one site out of this project scope, you know, plan to complete that project, you know, in the future, and, you know, focus on what we can accomplish, you know, without, you know, too much delay to our, what we committed to do in our funding agreements now. So that's what we're focused on doing. That's replacing what we refer to as the L90 culvert at Northeast 185th Street. And so again, this agreement supplement essentially memorializes all of the scope reductions that have occurred in the project, and but keeps the state's level of support for the project untouched. So I think those are the salient details. Happy to address any questions.
Any questions? Yes, Councilmember Fertani.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Manager Sylvia, for doing this again. Just to remind me, which one's the L100 culvert? Because you number the culverts 1 through 4 here. Which one's the L100?
That's the culvert underneath Ballinger Way Northeast, State Route 104.
Okay, so culvert 1 in the document that's attached. Okay,
That's
great,
right.
Thanks.
Yep.
And then any other questions?
Oh, and follow up on that one. So that one is also still being done, but not by us?
Correct.
Okay,
That WSDOT is completing that work next
Great.
year.
thank you.
Okay, any other questions? And this was our first touch on this too, is that correct?
Correct.
This is our second? First? or-
First.
First, okay, thank you. Oh, okay, I thought you were saying 2.
No, no.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For purposes of keeping this project moving along, I'd like to propose, colleagues, that we suspend our 3-touch rule for passage of this to allow the mayor to, authorizing the mayor to sign the supplement number 1. Again, this goes back to 2018, I believe, Mr. Sylvia, was the original agreement.
That's right.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moving second to eliminate our 3-touch rule on resolution 23-1886. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody like to move resolution 23-1886?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move resolution 23-1886, authorizing mayor to sign supplement number 1 to WSDOT local program state funding agreement to LA 9515 and WSDOT projects prospectus form for the SR 104/Lion Creek Culvert project.
Second.
It's moved in second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Please. Passes unanimously. Thank you, council, very much for moving that. I will say one thing on this, this gas station aisle fell into the creek 25 years ago. I drove by it on the morning it happened.
97.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous, and the city who loves their environment so much has had a gas station in a creek for 25 years. I have personally worked on this for 12 years. It's one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. The governor stands up, they want salmon, everybody wants salmon, but we can't get this project done. Well, we're gonna get it done. Or I'm gonna go up and do it. And you guys gonna arrest me, but it's just ridiculous. It's just, we can't preach that we care about things when we're not getting this type of stuff done. So Andy, get it done, okay? I love it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry, folks, this one really frustrates me. It's such a good project that needs to do a good for a lot of stuff. So with that, we're gonna move on to, do we have any other business, any other council discussion or actions on anybody's mind? Okay, seeing none, council committee reports. I don't think we have any committees. How about council member reports?
I'd be happy.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Both Lori and I attended the SCA PIC last night. Very fascinating discussion about a variety of things. The most robust discussion, of course, was about House Bill 1110. And presenters from, let's see, I'm going to forget their names, Candace and her colleague from AWC did an outstanding job of
Josh somebody.
Yes, Josh somebody did an outstanding job of presenting the challenges that that they're facing in the legislature. As you may recall, HB 1110, I believe it was, and Mr. Hill is much more versed in this than I am, and you're definitely not Mr. Hill.
SB 5466 too.
And yes,
Yes.
5466, and they both pass really basically with 3/4 majority. It's challenging, and I know that a number of our legislative friends have been helping. I do want to give a shout out to our friend Jerry Paulette, who has done a lot of work to try to help encourage his colleagues to consider the place that small cities find themselves, and particularly where we are at, literally at the intersection of two major state routes and on our BRT line, and we're at the juxtaposition of the perfect storm in terms of density when it comes to this bill. It was a very good conversation. One of the things that I mentioned, because nobody else mentioned it, I was one of the last people to speak. And I rattled, I said I was going to rattle a few cages, and that was the fact that it's very concerning that both the Master Builders Association and the Association of Realtors are sponsoring ads supporting this. And the question of really helping in the middle housing environment, as well as helping people find affordable properties. I do not personally believe, and many of our colleagues around the region do not believe, this is the right package to move forward. But it really appears that these two bills are going to move forward fairly rapidly. The governor was quoted, who we actually just saw yesterday at a wonderful event, was quoted as saying to the legislature, "Get the middle housing situation done." And so with all due respect to the governor, I think they're as I said last night, I believe they're kind of throwing things up against the wall to see what sticks, and unfortunately a lot of things have stuck, and it's a one size fits all kind of approach. So all of us will be watching that very closely. It's important to recognize that many of the small towns, of which there aren't that really many that fall into sort of our bracket of demographics, so to speak, particularly in terms of population. There was a call out from Mercer Island to get the small towns together to continue to try to lobby for some some balance. Everyone wants to see additional middle housing and particularly additional affordable housing, but this is not really going to address that in many people's eyes. So that was really the crux of that discussion. Our friend, Mr. Tolomartz from Issaquah, Sammamish came to mind because they were in a meeting I was in earlier today. Really kind of summed it up by saying that this is not a great solution, and there are going to be consequences, and it's unfortunate because it's a one-size-fits-all approach, and I'll leave that there. Do you have any other thing
Yes,
to add on that part?
Could I just add a few points of
Sure.
detail? The point that was made by the small cities is we're being held to the same density formulas and distances
Right.
as a Seattle or a shoreline. And so the per capita impact, or our growth targets traditionally have been based on per capita, but the per capita element is completely lacking. The different lot sizes are in these bills are completely lacking. So the provisions on a 45 for additional units on a 4,500 square foot lot versus a half an acre square lot are exactly the same. The cost to the small cities, some of which have either one planning staff and we don't have very many, or zero, and they just consulted out, is just frightening people in terms of what the consequences are when, like us, they're only really funded by property tax revenues. Also the lack of teeth for any kind of missing middle coming out of it is really kind of stunning. And so I noticed that the representative from Normandy Park said they've already had developers coming around because obviously they want to build high-priced houses in Normandy Park to provide the missing middle.
Yeah.
So it does appear that this legislation has so much support from the bulk of the legislators and the governor that it could pass. But and our friend from Issaquah, his point was Issaquah has planned for development where there's services, infrastructure, lack of environmental sensitivity, and this just kind of creates a conceptual approach as opposed to a tailored approach. So I fear there will be a lot of unintended consequences, and that sentiment was shared, but it didn't seem optimistic.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councilmember Bodie. I think too, I led my remarks by saying that the intersection of 104 and 522 is just a few hundred feet from Lake Washington, and also that we have worked very, very hard over a number of decades, with our tree ordinance in the last, 2015, I think it was first adopted. But prior to that, this community has had an environmental commitment that could be very severely impacted by this legislation. And I referenced the fact that the same people that have proposed this kind of legislation, proponents of this legislation, have talked about the environment and natural environment as being a question of equity, and having us lose our tree canopy to a significant degree because of additional development, because it's thoughtless regulation rather than thoughtful and forward-thinking regulation to preserve the natural environment is very concerning. And I've expressed that to a number of our legislators. And as Councilmember Bodie said, the challenge is there is a very significant push behind this, and to the point that some of us were talking about going down to Olympia next week to discuss this. It may not be worth the trip, honestly. We'll see where it goes. I'll leave that there because if you want to ask any questions offline, please feel free to do that about the PIC. I would also say to Councilmember Bodie's point too about planning departments. There are some communities that literally have zero planning staff, and even the communities that do have robust planning staff, they are anticipating pretty significant costs, and there are no considerations for that within this bill, or these bills. One thing I will note, the critical areas and setbacks, et cetera, will not be, and tree ordinances will not be superseded, so to speak. But the challenge is we can only protect certain kinds of trees. So the trees that are of modest size are going to be the ones that are going to suffer. And those are the ones that have been encouraging people to plant over decades now and are reaching, modest maturity and et cetera.
The densities could lead to 9-story buildings, basically. And because a lot of things are excluded, that what appears to be the initial densities are actually more dense because of the exclusions from the density calculation. So it is pretty stunningly broad.
Yeah. And the last thing I would just say, I attended the deputy mayor's meeting today. There was discussion about amongst the 5 of us plus David Hoffman, who's the SCA director, about this. And there was also a bit of a sentiment that some of the things that are happening in Olympia right now are a little bit hasty, kind of reactive, because it didn't happen last year. So they feel an urgency. There's definitely urgency to create more housing. It's just the right mix and the right legislation so that it's going in the right places. Councilmember Martz said from Issaquah, they have very carefully and thoughtfully tried to make sure that their growth is in places where their access to services, bus lines, et cetera, et cetera. And so the legislation doesn't take into account that we're an asphalt playground, I think Mr. Rose used to say, when it comes to the state highways. So that's that. I'm sure you're going to update us on the wonderful meeting yesterday.
Oh, I might, go ahead.
Let you have the fun.
Philippa's got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I've got a few things here, guys, and some of which is relevant to what you've just been talking about. So I was at the Growth Management Policy Board last week. And of course, they also went through a lot of those pieces of legislation and where they were at the time. But what we talked about was a couple of things. First of all, the state has released their forecast for population, which they do every 5 years to support comp plan updates. And so one of the things that we can do actually is to ask PSRC to present to us on population and demographic data that is now available. So I actually think that would be an interesting thing to do, and I would request that the administration make that invitation to the PSRC. The other report that we had that was fairly interesting, the PSRC did a study of all of the tools that are available to cities to increase housing. And they 87% of the cities in the PSRC, area, which is 3 counties basically, did respond. I think we did, from what I've had a discussion with Phil. So what they found was that the multifamily tax exemption was pretty widespread now. A lot of cities have passed that, including us. And also, making ADUs, more readily available, in terms of planning. So, which we've also done. Which reminds me though, and again, this would be a request I would have of the administration, Mr. Mayor, it would be very useful, I think, for council to have some reports back from the planning department as to whether or not the legislation that we passed has made any difference. Okay. So we would really welcome that. So 23%, one of the things they found is that small cities with high property values, could be us, have adopted the least number of tools. That the bigger cities and the lower property value cities have adopted more tools. So, you know, that's something that they pointed out. 23% of the cities have adopted middle density zoning changes, and they've used a variety of strategies for that. So that's not very many. And I think that's part of what the state legislature is responding to. There's housing action plan grant funding, and the cities that actually got that have adopted more incentives and more, you know, tools than the cities that didn't. So that again, you know, just points out that that it makes a difference if some of these requirements that are being put on us by various bodies come along with some support, because if they don't, you just can't get it done. And the other thing that was been very helpful in terms of, you know, increasing the number of tools and actual building of middle and low income housing has been the sub-regional partnerships like Arch. And so, you know, we did look at joining Arch. It's pretty expensive for a city of our size, and we're not sure how beneficial it is, but it's probably something council should look at again at some point. So that was that. And then we had Seashore last Friday. There's a new general manager at Metro, we learned. So a few interesting facts we learned from Metro. We had a presentation from them. The fastest growth in ridership right now is evenings and weekends. Youth ridership has gone up since they got their free passes. Metro is working very hard to address safety concerns. They're onboarding new security officers, and there's now 85 of them and 10 more in training. They're also standing up a behavioral health response team, because one of the issues that they're finding, not just on the buses, but also at the transit hubs, you know, the centers, is behavioral health issues. They have a significant workforce challenge. There's a shortage throughout the system. They're short 120 drivers and 30 mechanics. And this is really affecting them very much. And it's one of the reasons that you see service cuts going on throughout the system. They know that there's a lack of good ways of informing passenger, riders, what's happening to their bus, why isn't it coming? And they are working on that. There is a MetroFlex app now that shows all options to riders, though I'm not sure how good it is, again, with real-time information for what's happening to the bus you're waiting for. And they're using customer feedback and staff reports to identify hotspots where they really need that security and that behavioral health intervention and the teams. So all of that, was good information. I have to admit, I did tell my story because there were Sound Transit representatives there too, of what happened when my husband and I tried to take transit to go to the garden show at downtown a couple of weeks back, where we parked at Northgate, got on the train, and then the train stopped at the stadium stop and didn't move. And there was an announcement saying, there's a problem up ahead, we've been told to wait. Well, we waited. 20 minutes went by, and then we thought, well, what's happening? So I actually got out of the train, knocked on the driver window. The driver got back on the intercom and said, we're still waiting, and when we know something, we'll tell you. I didn't find that very helpful. So my husband and I then decided to take an Uber to downtown so that we could actually get to the garden show. And then on the way back, we went to the Westlake station, and we were on the platform, and there were a ton of people waiting, and the little electronic sign said that a train was going to come at 4:17. Well, 4:17 came and went. No train, more and more people. Finally, a train comes. It is packed to the doors with people. We did get on, and because, we are of a certain age, some nice young people got up and let us sit down. But I was pleased, though, to talk to a family who was sitting next to us who said that this was an unusual event for them, you know, that they travel a lot on the train and that these things didn't happen very often. But anyway, I told this story and I did get back from the Sound Transit people that, yes, they are working on better communication so that riders have real-time information about what's happening to their journey. As I pointed out, if you were on that train I was on at the stuck at the stadium and you were on your way to the airport, you were in crisis because you did not know if you were going to make your plane. And that for Sound Transit to just treat that as an inconvenience just does not build rider confidence. And if riders feel they cannot count on that transportation, they won't use it. So I just made that point. And you know, every other city you go to in the world that has some kind of metro, you know, train system, the underground, you know, the underground in London, the metro in Paris, you know, all of them, they have real-time data on those signs that tells you exactly when the next train is coming, where it's going to go, what its endpoint is going to be. And it's like, why we can't do that here, I just don't know. So, John, if you can have any influence on this, please do.
Council,
so anyway,
over in Italy, they have like 1 hour strikes.
yeah, I know.
And then they announce, I'm sorry, we're on strike for 1 hour.
Yes,
And
London's
wait.
the same. I understand. So anyway, we also had a presentation from Community Transit, and Community Transit is actually quite important to our community because it does cross over from, you know, Mount Lake Terrace to Shoreline, and people in Lake Forest Park use it. So I was quite interested to hear about it. They're also standing up a transit security unit to deal with the behavioral challenges they're seeing. They got a ridership increase. They're doing long range planning right now. And their long range planning is all about getting people to the light rail. So those double-decker buses that right now are going all the way to downtown will eventually stop either at the at 185th or at 145th. Apparently not Mount Lake Terrace, which I found kind of interesting. But anyway, but it did make me wonder what the capacity is really going to be on this line. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. So they're hoping to stop those double-decker buses on I-5 before WSDOT starts their Revive I-5 project, because we all know what a nightmare that's going to be. So I could understand that. Okay. So Shoreline has a request into the feds for $25 million for the 145th Street corridor. They're also looking at part of that, I think, is to build a bike network from the west to light rail. And it's called a RAISE grant, and it's for transportation infrastructure. I was kind of sorry to hear that the bike trail is from the west to the light rail. I'm hoping they would do something from the east to the light rail too. So anyway, we'll have to talk to our friends in Shoreline about that and see if we can get that a little, you know, expanded just a little bit. And so that's it.
Anybody else? Yes.
Yep, I'll try to be quick. Last Wednesday was a tree board meeting. Arbor Day, which in Washington is not the same date as the other 49 states. Arbor Day is April 13th, not the end of April. The tree board is planning a tree planting event in Horizon View Park. Probably they're going to push it from the Thursday to the Saturday, just so that it'll be easier for people to attend. So that should be fun. Also, just to push, I think that they're currently at 5 members out of 7, so there's 2 vacancies. So I'm not sure if there's any applicants in the pipeline, but the tree board is eager to be more fully staffed. They're also eager to, I mentioned that there might be some potential tree code revisions coming down the pipe related to right-of-way and the state highway. And so they're eager to take a look at that. If that's something that we'll be looking at by the end of the month. That way they could look at it at their April meeting. But otherwise, and they're also looking forward to coming to the March 23rd meeting to just present their 22 report and their 23 work plan, similar to the Climate Action Committee, which visited our previous meeting.
Councilmember Goldman, remember Councilmember Lebo was talking about the fact that it would be good to have a replanting plan associated with the BRT proposal, and that by having a replanting plan, you avoid the need to take a check and maybe not get all the benefits that you would like to have. And also it gives you a chance to have a community vision for tree replanting. So I hope they would consider that element as part of their work plan for this year.
Yep, that is a good point, Councilmember Bodie. I believe that it is on their work plan that they are looking at where trees might overflow trees that can't be replanted along the Bothell Way right of way.
Well, even the plan for replanting along Bothell Way, so it isn't property by property, but there's a larger vision so that if the permit, we don't know how the permit applications are going to come in, batched or not batched, or how largely they'll be batched. So if there is a larger tree planting vision even along Bothell Way, that would be, I think, very important, because then individual permits can feed into that that concept, that planting concept. So I want to, emphasize that piece of it as well as the planting elsewhere piece.
That is a good point. I'll relay that.
Thank
to
you.
them.
Thank you.
And on point, I might just recommend, we drove yesterday down Juanita Drive, it is, isn't it? Yeah. And Kenmore has done a really very nice job of plantings all the way down the new sidewalk and the so if the tree board might want to take a look at that, because it really is a rather beautiful looking project, actually. And any of you, yeah.
Mhm.
If I may just also offer that, again, I think that having a tree plan would be very helpful for all of us. But if there is sort of a vision of what might occur on SR 522, public input would be something that would be really of value. Lake Forest Park is Lake Forest Park, not forest.
It used to not even be lake. Now it's Lake Forest Park.
So not all of the Sheridan Heights folks consider themselves just Forest Park. They also consider lake as part of their.
And then I had one follow-up about the housing bills. My understanding is that PSRC kind of put out a projection of what might happen development-wise as a result of Bill 1110, kind of for the whole region. And I was wondering if they break that up by city, because it'd be interesting to see what their projections are for Lake Forest Park.
Yeah. That's a good question, Larry. I'll ask next time I'm there.
Hey, anybody else?
Or we should invite them here so we can ask them.
Everybody about the wonderful day yesterday. I will. I'm just gonna kind of pause, because I usually start right about now and somebody's gonna, hey, wait, I got another idea. More thing. So, yesterday was a fantastic day. Mainly for 5 great cities that did a fantastic job to actually get something done. And I will keep saying that, it was a city, is a Shoreline, Lake Forest Park, Kenmore, Bothell, and Kirkland. The staffs of those and the city managers, and they all got together, and we have a problem. We have no place to put anybody, and Radar is started by the same group pretty much. How many years ago was that now? About 7 years? Yeah. Wow. I remember talking about that. I mean, it's been a great thing. We had no place to take the people. Wonderfully yesterday, they have signed a contract for a location in Kirkland. You need to thank Kirkland for giving a place to do it. It was awesome. And mainly it's awesome because it was the 5 cities that got together to make this happen. And I kind of think that's the future of our city, is in the north end of the lake, because we're always going to have to do that. And it's really great. And we met a lot of people. It was good. And I'm, as you can tell, I'm very much thankful for the city. I am cities that work together, because I think that's the people closest to the people seem to get the stuff done. And I want, anytime you have a chance to work with any of those cities, I think it's a great idea to do the best you can. And like I said, eventually that's what we are, as one big city, and transit is, I got a dirty look when I said one time they should just get one transit authority and it just be everybody from Tacoma to Everett, and that meant too many people lost their jobs if we did that. So that didn't work out right. But so yesterday was a fantastic day. I'm proud of the city. I'm proud of our staff. Phil and the chief was right up there. He was, they changed his name though. We'll get you a new badge and everything. So that's fine.
Mike Henridan?
Yeah. Yeah. Sounded like me to introduce me, but really we are fortunate. Hopefully they hope to have it running by end of next year. And it's exciting. The chief will have a place that they have somebody they need to take somewhere. There's a place to go. The head of
people.
Well, they said it could serve up to 14,000 people in a year.
Wow.
So, and that's pretty amazing. And, you know, the head of Evergreen Hospital is there because they're excited because they won't be brought to the hospital, which will open up other things. So yesterday was a win-win-win day for everybody. So thank you, council, for pushing everything we did through, and we will think that's a good one. We get that.
Thank you, especially to the chief and Phil
Oh, yeah.
for all the hard
Oh, yeah.
work they put into this.
And I walked around, and a lot of people were, even people that were doing it were saying that Phil was kind of the guy. So I'm only saying that tonight because he's not here. So, oh, you're probably out there, aren't you, Phil? Hey, great job. But from there, we'll go on to one thing. I had an idea. I would like to propose, I would like to do something we used to do before COVID and back in the day. I'd like to have a night to celebrate all our volunteers.
Yeah.
And I would like to figure out a way to start that out with all the commissions meeting at one table for a half an hour, and just talk to each other so they know what they're all doing and how they all kind of, you know, we all know they intertwine. I'd like to get them together, then have a event where we can honor what they've done for the city. We used to do that. I think it's a good thing to do. I have been very impressed lately. We've been getting a lot of people asking and signing up. We've got another one next week for the planning commission, which is you'll be amazed too. I'm really happy with what's coming out there, and I will work on the tree board. So I will work on that. I'll talk to Corey, but I think we got some in the pipeline there too. And I will say again, I would like to have a alternate system. Because right now I probably have enough to do 2 alternates already for the planning commission.
Right.
So I want to get that figured out.
Wow. that's
So
awesome.
just so we have people in the wings, we can do it. And also I have interviews for the civil service coming up next week too. So we get the word out, people are choosing it. But for my last thing, I should have done the good things first. You know, I saw a survey, 93% of the people they surveyed want to change the pursuit laws. All the stuff that's happening in the bills for housing and stuff, I'm getting kind of discouraged because I don't think we as people and citizens matter anymore. It's frustrating to me that we have a lot of opinions, and this bills going through here are going to hurt us. And I don't understand where we do not get connected to the people that we vote in and represent us. And we've got to figure out a way to change that, because it's not working right now, because it's, you know, it's hurting us down here. You know, the pursuit laws and everything are just, they're really destroying the morale of the police departments, and they're not good for the city. So I know I'm kind of a loner on that, but we really got to figure out a way to change that.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, that was a concern of many cities at the PIC meeting, was the lack of good improvements in the pursuit laws.
And that's a shame, because it would be a no-brainer, but we just all need to remember that we're the ones close to the people, and we need to do the job. Yes, sir.
On point, the Senate did pass a vehicle
Yeah.
pursuit law yesterday.
Yeah.
I believe it would change it from probable cause to reasonable suspicion. I'm sure the chief will know more
Yeah,
about the
well.
details there.
I'm kind of old school. If you're bad, you get pulled over, but that doesn't work anymore. So, but with that, a lot of good things. Yes.
If you're finished, I have something kind of funny to share with you.
Well, I'm finished, but we have one more thing after me. So go ahead and do your.
Oh,
funny thing.
so, you know, I'm a fan of technology, and I'm a fan of artificial intelligence. Took a couple classes at back east in artificial intelligence and things like that. But I have to say, there's definitely a question of whether or not it's effective. So that's the serious part. Particularly when it comes to facial recognition. So I give the chief a shout out. One of my friends who's a technologist who was sorting through some of his photos and using the Google artificial intelligence algorithm to do facial recognition sort of photos. And that's who it matched me with. It thinks
Steve Martin.
thinks I'm Steve Martin.
Well, that's.
This is, I'm not kidding.
Wow, that's
So-
Steve Martin.
On a serious note, if this was used in prosecutions, Steve Martin would be going to jail right now.
I don't think it worked very good, but yeah. So for last tonight, it's time for the city administrators report. So
Oh,
Jeff, step
that's
on up and
right.
tell us what's going on in the city. You're in the chair, dude.
It's just nice to be nominated. Thank you.
Good job.
The
Okay.
one thing I do want to, I do have one thing to report, which we do have pickleball lines now up at Horizon View.
What's that?
We do have pickleball
Oh, we have
Oh,
pickleball up at
that
Horizon
got
View.
painted today.
Okay.
Corey was able to get that figured out and she did a great job with that.
That
will
will
make-
be, that is awesome. I know a lot went into that and the pickleballers are all very passionate.
I know one lady who's doing cartwheels right now. I kind of learned that when I interviewed her. I kind of, oh, she likes pickleball. So
Great,
that was
thanks,
great.
Jeff.
No, good job, council. We got a lot done. Have a good week. Hopefully things turn a little bit in Olympia and help us out a little bit. We'll do the best we can. Chief, again, thank you for all you do. And you guys have a great night. Third.